Dr. Singer, in your testimony, you talked about the natural, sadly, natural progression of this drug crisis. This one began with pharmaceuticals, evolved to heroin, then fentanyl, now synthetics, and now we're even talking about tranq and some other horrific substances. What are the right public health solutions? I really believe we have to think outside the box. We can't be afraid to embrace that people, not just addicts, but those who are addicted and those who are just experimenting are at grave risk of death. So what are the public health things we should be doing?
Well, thank you for that question. In fact, what we need to do is, instead of just focusing on the supply side, we need to focus on protecting people who are using drugs from the dangers of fentanyl and other even more deadly contaminants. I have a chapter actually in the Cato Handbook for Policymakers that was just released that deals with this. Among the things that this committee could do is, for example, our drug paraphernalia laws make it illegal for a person to hand out a fentanyl test strip, or now they make xylazine test strips for tranq, because that's considered drug paraphernalia as testing equipment. Many states are changing their laws to allow that. Both red and blue states, South Dakota did last week, Arizona did a year ago, but there's also federal paraphernalia laws. Another very important thing, in my opinion, is for this committee to consider either repealing or amending 21 U.S. Code Section 856, also called the Crack House Statute. I have a policy brief that came out yesterday about this. Overdose prevention centers have existed throughout the developed world since 1986, when they first started in Switzerland. They're in 16 countries. There are 147 of them in 91 locations. We are an outlier. 38 are in Canada, 25 are in Germany, 14 are in Switzerland. But we're an outlier because our federal law prohibits people from helping their neighbors by setting up centers where they can be brought inside and used in a safe environment and have people standing by with naloxone.
I see my time has expired. I thank you both for the conversation, and I couldn't agree with you more. I said to people in my district—
The gentlelady's time has expired.
I agree with your recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman recognized chair recognized the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rackwall, you make all of us Wisconsinites proud today. Do you know the statistics from 2019 to 2021? There's nearly a doubling of the number of deaths in Wisconsin from fentanyl. Is any state exempt from this in your travels? And
I agree with you, Mr. Tiffany. From what I believe, in those 2 years, Wisconsin's percentage was about 97% increase. And in my opinion, with the experience that we have, which I feel is probably, early in its stages, because Logan, it's been very recent, but I think every single state is experiencing an increase. Our kids are at risk. Every single kid is at risk. And even if there's kids that we're not seeing, some kids are not dying, but they're dealing with addiction issues as well, very young, because these cartels, these pills they're being made to drive addiction. That's what they want. They want these kids to be addicted. It's a business. But I do believe it's everywhere.
And is this why you said everything has to be done in order to try to get this under control?
Absolutely. If we miss one little loophole, that's why we're seeing numbers go up. I mean, there's some things being done, but everything has to be done. It has to be done at every angle.
Dr. Westlake, it's also good to have you from the great state of Wisconsin here also. And I want to thank you. I voted for the HOPE agenda in Wisconsin, which you helped put together, which was really groundbreaking, wasn't it, in America, first of its kind?
Yes.
You're an emergency room doctor. What does death look like from fentanyl?
Right. So opioids just cause respiratory suppression, so people just stop breathing, and then they pass out, and then they turn blue, and then they die, if not resuscitated.
So it's almost like they're being smothered?
Or the same thing with an execution. It can be the same thing as a chemical execution.
So it's similar to a chemical execution?
Right.
Many of the critics of FRS scheduling, Dr. Westlake, cite concerns with mandatory minimums and the sentencing guidelines, insisting that this criminal justice framework will do nothing to prevent FRS market saturation. Can you briefly explain why it's important to permanently keep this on Schedule 1 with the associated criminal penalties?
Great, yeah, thanks for the question. So this, criminal penalties do not stop use of drugs. Drug users are going to use drugs. People with substance abuse disorder are going to use drugs. Traffickers, as Dr. Singer said, are going to traffic drugs regardless of the penalties. But what this does, and where this is novel, and where I think this is not some shiny object that's distracting from the purpose, this closes off the spigot of fentanyl-related substances. So this targets the legal chemical companies in China from stopping creating fentanyl-related substances. According to the GA report in 2021, it has accomplished that. There's relatively no new fentanyl-related substances being created. So you've got this big faucet of illicit fentanyl, which is a huge problem. Right now, the spigot for fentanyl-related substances is turned off, but it could reopen. And I think the 2,500 people that died in Florida from fentanyl-related substances that were legal in 2016 to 2017 would disagree that fentanyl-related substances is a shiny object.
Mr. Maltz, what we basically heard from the other side is that immigration is not a problem. We didn't hear that in the testimony from Sheriff Daniels, Cochise County, Arizona, and the sheriff from Yuma County over the last month. Do you agree with the sheriffs that immigration has fostered this increase in fentanyl coming across the border?
100%. The country's being invaded. There's migrants coming from over 160 countries. They're looking to get here for a better life, many of them, okay? But we also have terrorists, we have rapists, we have sexual predators, we have criminals coming over that border every day. There's over 1 million gotaways coming into the country. Here's the problem, Congressman. The people in this town don't listen to the experts that know what they're talking about, that have been there on the border. Chairman Biggs goes down there, like many of you go down there and talk to the experts, not reading it in the Washington Post.
Sir, yeah, I just need my final 15 seconds here, but thank you for that. If for no other reason, let's set aside the human trafficking and the largest human trafficking network that has been set up in the history of the world. Set it aside. We have the greatest number of people on the terror watch list come across our border, correct?
Yes.
Set that aside. If for no other reason, for fentanyl, we should be securing the border. I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, Mrs. Is it Rockwall? Mrs. Rockwall, I was here when you testified, and I'm very sorry about your son and the circumstances, your husband as well. Did the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, after your son's overdose, do anything to start to inform students about drugs and have some type of a public interest program there, public information?
Did we
Did Wisconsin-Milwaukee do anything?
The university?
Yes, ma'am.
They did after we respectfully pushed them and continued to push them. We were able to get naloxone boxes installed across the campus for safety, and then we were also able to have them instill a freshman program so that the students were aware of what to do and the signs, et cetera, posters up, all of those kinds of things.
Well, thank you for what you did. And do you know if that's been done in other colleges?
In Wisconsin specifically, 90% of the University of Wisconsin system does have the naloxone boxes, and they are following suit with that. But you know, every school's different, so
Right.
there's not a unified approach at this point.
And as far as they have like an orientation, they tell them about drugs and warn them?
Correct.
Who do they have do that? Do you know? Is it a police person, or is it a community person, an athlete, or what?
Not an athlete. The police are involved. In fact, actually, as we speak today, here right now, there's a program at the university today that we were supposed to speak at that our board is actually presenting for us. So there are speaking events that we are being involved in, but also the substance department of the school and the police.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know who to ask the question to. Maybe Mr. Maltz, if you can not go over the top with me. I've got ear problems, but whatever. What works? What, Dr. Singer, you can answer this too, or Dr. Westlake. What has proven to work to reduce? Yeah, Dr. Singer, you got an answer, please?
Well, in many other countries, they don't have our overdose problem, even though there's a drug problem in a lot of Europe. So, for example, in Switzerland, in Germany, in Portugal, in France, in Spain, they've put much more of in Canada, they put much more of an emphasis on harm reduction. Harm reduction, the concept of harm reduction is to non-judgmentally do things for people that can make whatever choices they're making less dangerous. That comes natural to doctors, because in this country and in most developed countries, that's largely what we do. When I have a patient,
How do you do that? Having Narcan around?
When it comes to drugs, you could, again, make it easier for people to get the overdose antidote and naloxone, allow people to get test strips to test to see if what they purchased on the black market is what they think it is, see if it has fentanyl or xylazine, but also there are many groups in this country that want to set up these overdose prevention centers, which have been proven to, there's not been one overdose taking place. There are two that are right now in defiance of federal law operating in New York City. They started in November 2021, and by April of 2022, they'd already reversed 230 overdose deaths. Those are 230 people who would have been dead. So, but they're not allowed to do that because
Is that the only place they have it is in New York City?
I beg your pardon?
That only place that has that program is in New York?
Well, in November 2021, the mayor of New York, in defiance of 21 USC Section 856, permitted a nonprofit private harm reduction organization to operate 2 overdose prevention centers, and they've been functioning, and so far the Justice Department hasn't acted on it.
Okay, thank you. You know, I think all of us would like to see this reduced, eliminated if possible. And Mr. Maltz, I appreciate your work in the past, but you know, I don't know if the idea of the death penalty is a good idea, because the reality is, and this is just, you know, my guess, I don't think people who buy the fentanyl think they're going to overdose, so they buy it. So they've heard it's a fun trip or a good trip or whatever. And I suspect that the people that deal it don't think they're going to get caught. Even if you have the death penalty, they don't think I'm going to get caught. So I don't know if that's the answer. I think we have busted a lot of the cartels, have we not? I don't know their names. Is it Pablo Escobar, somebody we got and put away?
Sir, first of all, I apologize for yelling and screaming, but you know what? I've been dealing with the families for many years, and there's no action going on in this town. So I will tell you this. I will tell you.
Action.
Let me answer the question. First of all, I would appreciate if you stop calling it an overdose. It's a poisoning, and it's a war against our kids. So stop with the overdosing. That's part of the problem. The American public thinks it's a substance that people want to take.
My time is expired. I yield back.
Your time is
Chairman,
expired. Did you finished answering the question, Mr. Maltz?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gates.
Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent that Mr. Issa be permitted to sit on the panel for the purpose of accepting the yielding of time.
Without objection?
Without objection, I am ready to allow Mr. Issa to be on. And Mr. Issa, I will be joining the caucus that you'll be speaking of, so I hope that you and Congresswoman Dean will add me to that caucus. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And now I recognize Mr. Jordan. Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. The title of this hearing should be, inaction is no longer an option. And so one of the questions that you had said was you're tired of nothing happening in this town. That's because we've had inaction as we've gone from 0 to 108,000 deaths a year with fentanyl. In San Diego, we have a locker that has 147,000 pounds of deadly drug. A third of it is fentanyl. 10 years ago, 0 was fentanyl, and it was mostly marijuana and meth. So when we look at what we need to do, and I'll just be brief and say, what would you have us do on a bipartisan basis that would be the most effective single item? And we'll start on the left.
So, Congressman, thanks for the question. First of all, we have to declare this a public health and national security emergency from the White House, because it all starts at the top. Then we have to get celebrities and professional athletes, role models, to start making video reels to get to the kids on social media. Because right now on social media, that's what they're doing all day. And that's why they're dying, because they're buying this stuff on social media. And by the way, sextortion is also very big on social media. So why are the social media companies allowed to facilitate the death and destruction of our communities?
Okay, and I appreciate that, because that is one of the areas that information simply has, certainly is not equal to the 108,000 deaths. From a standpoint of, and I'll ask this, I'll start at the far right here now. When someone knowingly produces a pill that looks like one kind of drug but is in fact fentanyl, in California they've had the novel attempt to in fact have, when someone dies of it, have it be considered murder because it's a knowing act. Would you support a federal law that made it, in fact, by definition, murder to produce a deadly fentanyl pill that appears to be something else?
Congressman, yes, absolutely. If I took a drink and I got something poisoned in the drink and died, that would be murder, correct?
Correct. So those are two areas. The third one, of course, is we have two partners in this. We're the third partner because we're the buyer, and certainly we have to do our part. And this is where information and getting beyond just ignoring it is important. But let me just ask the two questions. Mexico is currently enjoying a gang success of billions of dollars that is corroding the variability of their government to manage their country, because the cartels have more money than the government. And that's coming out of China, where the precursors come out. So the question I have for all of you is, as we're advertising, as we're increasing the crimes, what action should we take to stem the flow from China through Mexico? Yes.
Again, so when you look at the spigot of illicit fentanyl, that's a huge issue, and I'm not here to really focus on that. I'm focusing on fentanyl-related substances, and one thing Congress can do tomorrow is permanently close that loophole.
Yes, sir.
Congressman Issa, we've been doing the same thing over and over again for 50 years since President Nixon declared war on drugs, and expecting a different result each time, and doing it even harder and causing even more people to be in prison and damaging relations with even more countries, still not going to work. I guarantee you, because we're going to probably be here in a couple of years talking about the nitazene crisis. I think we should put the emphasis and focus on making it safer for the people who are going to continue to go to the black market and use drugs by getting the government out of the way of groups that want to employ harm reduction strategies that save lives.
I appreciate your view on that. I respectfully disagree. The countries that have tried it mostly have had other problems. But I do agree with one thing, which is that we have been fighting the fight for a long time. We've seen the drugs change. Ma'am, I'm going to close by saying I meet regularly with one after another parent or sibling or spouse of someone who has died from the, and whether they call it an overdose or a deadly poison, most of the time it's an amount that is deadly in a single pill. That is not true of other drugs. It is true of fentanyl today. And so you have my deepest sympathies for your loss, and we will, I promise, we will have action, not inaction. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Issa. Chair recognizes Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to follow up on a point raised just now by Mr. Issa, but first I wanted to also say thank you to Ms. Rockwell for being here and sharing your story. I know how difficult it is and how much courage it takes. I've had the chance to work with parents who, like yourself, have found themselves in an unthinkable situation, including two parents, Chris and Laura Didier, who were my guests at the State of the Union a couple weeks ago. And I think it's because of the power of your voice and the voices of people like the Didiers and other parents who have had that courage that the president did at least acknowledge the scale of this problem in his State of the Union address, the largest platform that he has as president. Mr. Chair, we heard from the ranking member that this is not a crime problem. And I would have to take issue with that statement. After all, we're talking about a poison that largely originates with dedicated criminal organizations and that is peddled in our communities by dealers to unsuspecting young people under false pretenses using social media or any other means at their disposal. So yes, there are multiple dimensions to this problem. First and foremost, securing the border, raising awareness, but holding criminals accountable is a very important dimension. And in that respect, we actually have some very recent news out of my district. In the last 2 days, there's been a preliminary hearing for a defendant, the drug dealer Carson Shu. His victim was a 20-year-old soon-to-be father named Cade Webb, who died of fentanyl poisoning after consuming a fake pill. Some may actually have heard about his story because he is the cousin of Logan Webb, who's the star pitcher for the San Francisco Giants, who after the tragedy used his position to share the story to raise awareness, and then other Major League Baseball players did so as well. So yesterday, the preliminary hearing concluded, and this happened to take place in Placer County, where the DA's office, led by District Attorney Morgan Geyer, has been very committed to using every tool at their disposal to get a handle on the fentanyl crisis. They've been part of public awareness campaigns like One Pill Can Kill, and they have been very aggressive in using the criminal laws to hold dealers accountable, under the belief that anyone who sells this lethal substance and doesn't care whether their customer lives or dies is guilty of murder. So in the death of Cade Webb, and in prosecuting the dealer, Carson Shu, they decided to charge him with murder, because that's what this is. And yesterday, there was a holding order in the case, and it is now going to go to trial, and this drug dealer will face murder charges for selling this lethal substance to this young man in our community. So I would just encourage prosecutors across the country to take a look at what the district attorney's office is doing under the leadership of Morgan Geyer in Placer County. Because yes, I think we need stiffer penalties, and that does need to be legislated. But there's a lot we can do under existing criminal laws. And since Placer County started being more aggressive in prosecuting dealers, law enforcement is hearing about results on the street that dealers are now wary of selling in our community. So I'd just ask the question to Mr. Maltz. You know, we've heard that this isn't a crime problem. We've heard that having stiffer penalties for the dealers isn't going to really do anything. Does that perspective resonate more with your experience, or does the perspective of the law enforcement in my district that this actually is serving as a real deterrent sound more realistic to you?
Well, there's leadership in California. I know in San Diego they have Task Force 10 with the DEA and Homeland Security, other agencies, and they're prosecuting defendants for the death of these kids that are dying. But I will tell you this, I talk to DEA agents every day, and you know why they're upset right now? Because the Department of Justice is putting out more guidance and more restrictions and more requirements to charge minimum mandatory sentences for people that are killing our kids. Like, it doesn't get any simpler. If they're killing our kids, they need to feel the pain and go to jail. It's not going to stop the problem because there's so many kids addicted. Because right now in America, there's a lot of anxiety, social, depression. COVID caused a lot of this. So these kids are turning to these pills, and they have no idea what they're getting. But my thing is, they have to be told that the pills will kill you. They don't know that because they're not getting the messages. They're not watching this hearing. They're not watching mainstream media, cable news. That's why the athletes and the celebrities have to be called to the White House, and they have to participate. And they got to put China aside because of the big money they make, and they have to go and they educate the kids and save lives.
Time, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Maltz. I yield back.